Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Vaults Remastered. This is my story of conversion, my tale, my journey. I'm taking my original homebrewed 5th edition game world, known as the Vaults, and I am converting it into Pathfinder's 2nd edition rule system remastered version, which is scheduled to be released in another couple weeks. I think it's November 15th, 2023. This video is going to be the first in my series where I'm going to focus on the deities of my world as a starting point, and then spinning off the various homebrews from there. And I'm going to go through my process of how I come up with a concept for some sort of divine entity and turn it into a usable, gameable, lore-rich narrative entity called the Primordial. Today's topic, today's individual, today's person, today's divine entity is Kavarka, the radiant sovereign of Prismar. Now I know what you're asking, who the heck is Kavarka? Well, rather than I myself trying to explain it all to you, I have gone ahead and invited one of the people who lives within the vaults, someone with intimate knowledge of Kavarka, someone who knows his lore better than I do, to explain who or what this entity is. So without further ado, let's see what they have to say.
Deep beneath the glistening spires of Corsarum, amidst gems that hold tales of a time before time, there lies a legend. A being of insatiable greed and radiant beauty, shimmering and fractured. Who, you might ask, wields such power? Enter the realm of Prismar, bask in the brilliance, and learn of the might of the unblemished Lord, Kavarka.
So there we are, Kavarka, the unblemished lord, the radiant sovereign of a place known as Prismar, in a city called Portsarum. Who is this guy? Where did this concept come from? That's what today's video is about. Where do you get these ideas from? Which I'm sure many of you already have your own gods. But how do you take these entities and then turn them into a homebrewed Pathfinder version of themselves? So today what I want to get into is how I go about that process, using Pathfinder resources such as gods and magic, as well as relying upon a great creative tool, my AI muse, Chatty Cathy, who is ChatGPT. And I'm also going to share other resources that I use, other inspirations. Where am I getting the ideas for Kavarka and some of this other stuff we're going to get into today? And show how I go about taking some just sort of dry text and turn it into flavorful, usable mechanics, reliable game stuff material. And then we're going to talk about how we can also develop the lore such that it's usable for your players, for your game world itself. Now, why am I starting with gods? And, if you're planning on doing something like this, why should you start with your gods? Well, if you take a look at the gods and magic resource from Pathfinder, which I believe is going to be in the Game Master's core, Game Mastery core with the revised version, remastered version coming out, they get into this. And a lot of this is pseudo common sense, I guess, but when you see it written somewhere else, it kind of just clicks for you. So a lot of these thoughts I already had in my head, but as I was reading this, it really was like, yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I'm thinking. So in Pathfinder, the divine world, gods, deities, my primordials, they are a quarter of the magic of your game world. And fantasy games, TTRPGs like Pathfinder, D&D, etc., they are magic. That's kind of goes hand in hand with the concept of fantasy. So if you're going to be getting into Pathfinder, you're going to need gods. D&D, you're going to need gods, right? Because they are so important just from the power of the magic. They're the entities that are granting your clerics their spells. They're the ones that are giving your Pathfinder champions, or what D&D would call paladins, they're giving them their motivations and their powers. So the gods have a huge role in any fantasy game that you're playing, whether it's, some game that you buy from a book or you make it yourself. They're involved in your game world in some way, shape, or form. Particularly in Pathfinder, aside from the spells and the divine magical, tradition, they also have a great system known as divine intercessions that the deities are that you can use for your deities. A great way for you to make your deities even more felt and real in your game because if your PC worshippers have been nice and get the attention of their gods for whatever deeds they're doing, the gods can send them boons for the day or the week or whatever. Conversely, if your PCs are being naughty and, going murder hobo on you, well, then maybe one of the gods sends down a curse, and there's system, there's tools, there's mechanics behind it. You don't have to just try to make stuff up. Okay, so that's one of the beautiful things I find with Pathfinder 2e. There's rules for pretty much everything that you normally would have to make up on the fly or homebrew yourself. In fifth edition, you've got a resource, you've got something you can consult, and you can reflavor it for whatever your game is. And also, don't forget that your gods are probably major plot drivers as well. In a typical fantasy, maybe they're sending down portents or omens, or their philosophy is driving some big bad evil guy or some you know faction of holy people. That all is part and parcel to a fantasy game. So having gods and developing them and remastering them and starting with them is super important, especially in my particular game world, the vaults, because the gods, the primordials, are going to be on point center for the remastered version of my story. Spoiler. Now, where do you come up with ideas for primordials or your gods or whatever? Well, you can use the ones that are right out of the book. D&D's got a bunch of gods in their books. Pathfinder certainly has a bunch. You can find some third-party resources. There are plenty of deities out there. But for me, and I would think you'll probably agree, that you really want to make sure that the deities, the entities, these primordials, your gods, they match your game's theme. So for me, I wanted to really have this us versus them, this underworld versus the top, the surface world, the people who feel abandoned and hated and despised that are stuck in the vaults versus those who are on the surface and loved and bask in the glow of the sun. That was a major theme. That is a major theme of my game. I also wanted to have these primordials be unrecognized, obscure, forgotten, alien. They have been imprisoned or banished and hidden for generations. People don't really know who they are anymore. At least on the surface, the ones people who live below the world are very familiar with them. And I also wanted them to be elemental, visceral, dangerous, alien, right? Like, and based upon the major elements that are in the game world, earth and fire and darkness and shadow. So I needed creatures, entities, gods, these primordials to embody these things, to represent these emotions, these philosophies. And the problem that I ran into is that when you look at the published stuff like Pathfinder and D&D, those published gods are super intertwined with those game worlds. It's kind of hard to separate them. Yeah, you can separate out their sort of their stats and their domains, but their lore is heavily integrated into those game worlds, which they should be, right? I mean, if you're playing Pathfinder and you're playing in the world of Golarion, well then, yeah, you should be worshiping gods that the people there are familiar with. So that just makes sense. But for a homebrew game, that's a tougher sell. I do have my own homebrewed gods that do exist on my surface, but they, like the ones from D&D and Pathfinder, were too anthropomorphic. They were too humanoid. They're too traditional, like your typical Zeus or Odin or whatever. I wanted something weird and strange and alien, like I said. Pathfinder does have some oddities in some of the books, like Gods and Magic has some. But not like an entire sort of pantheon that would fit what I was going for. There's also third-party publishers out there like Cobalt Press. I've relied upon them, and I've used some of their information as inspiration. And Weird Games, who produces Malifaux Through the Breach, is another source that I've relied upon heavily. And for this particular primordial, this Kavarka that I've created, he actually came from an older edition of D&D, because both game systems, if you don't know, Pathfinder and D&D, they go back decades. So there's plenty of resources out there, and Kavarka was one of these older edition resources. He was originally produced in second edition. However, I found him on the D&D 4e wiki under the primordial cascade or entry, and there was a whole series of just weirdo elemental strange deities known as primordials. And I have tapped into this resource heavily for many of the primordials that I have created. So I've used a lot of these for inspiration. Now, where did Kavarka specifically come from? Let's go ahead and let our narrator let you know.
As I pored over the ancient tablets detailing the histories of the Primordials, I found first mention of my unblemished lord engraved upon a worn tablet from the year 1991 post-schism. My ancestors bore witness to the appearance of a titanic being of crystalline wonder, which they named Crystalline in the stone-tongued Petrin.
So Kavarka originated from this second edition, I think it was an Archamental in the primordial list I saw, called Crystalli or Crystalli. It was a creation by a guy named Matthew P. Hargenrader, and it was published in Dragon Magazine 174, which was back in 1991. So we're talking 30, plus years ago. He was this crystalline giant. He was a quasi-elemental. He was the ruler of the plane of mineral. And just seeing his artwork, which you have the image there, it just clicked for me. It got me thinking, got my imagination going. It matched my setting. I've got a crystalline, earthy entity. I've got this creature that has crystal skin and is huge and giant. And, I bet nobody, the average Joe or Jane out there, has no idea who Crystalli is. Never heard of him. I certainly hadn't. So he proverbially and quite literally is a forgotten creation. And he's just waiting for a remaster to give him new life, to bring him back to light. And so that is where I went with this guy. I saw this cool creation from about 30 years ago, and I'm like, I need to do something with this. But of course, taking this guy and remastering him into one of my primordials for my game was a huge challenge. Titanic challenge, right? Pun intended. First thing is that the source material for him was limited to just one page in that article in Dragon Magazine. And the wiki, when I searched for him, I found him at the Forgotten Realms wiki or something like that. Again, it was sort of a short entry. It wasn't a lot of detail there. And then the detail that was in the reference was pretty limited. And it talked about places that don't exist in my game world, or entities like the Iowan stones. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's like a goddess of magic from Greyhawk or something like that. And the quasi-elemental plane mineral, that doesn't exist. And kinda, sorta does, maybe in my game world. The positive material plane, the same kind of idea. I had to take some of these things and figure out, do I just scrap them completely or create them? I don't know. And of course, maybe one of the silliest things is I really hate that name, Cristalli. I mean, what? It's like some Italian perfume or something. This guy's this titan, right? He's this crystalline giant. And from what I could tell, he's like be able to scorch his enemies with blasts of radiant fire. I mean, he can't be crystally. Come on. So he needed a lot of polishing. Another pun. The theme was just mismatching, right? I have my vaults, this dark, somber, grim, isolated, setting, like I was telling you, and meanwhile I've got this Titanic, this gorgeous, this radiant, this brilliant, shiny, vain entity. Those two things are not meshing, but they could. He also lacked a home in my game world. The vaults itself is mainly the ruins of some ancient draconic cities. And it's, darkness. There is, bioluminescence and that sort of thing, but it's, dark cavernous environment. This guy is a creature of lights, of brilliance, of wonder. He needs a home to match that. And the reference material also didn't have much in the way of goals for the guy, other than he was a protector of this mineral domain. So not much I could do with that. That didn't necessarily fit with my game world. So I had to figure out what would this guy, if he existed in my game, what would he want? And then there was no personality details that I could tell in any of the entries that I found for him. But there was plenty of inspiration here, just because I was thinking, what would a brilliant, gleaming gemstone giant, you know, be like? And so I started leaning into that, this perfect cut, this gleaming, gorgeous titan, right? But what if he was flawed? What if he had something, a crack or an occlusion? And that started the wheels turning for me. It started me thinking about how I could take, this little bits of information that was available on the internet and in the Dragon magazine and the arts, and turn it into something brand new that could fit in my game world. And when I try to find something to fit my game world, I don't just mean it's there. And this is, kind of a problem I have with sort of the published materials, is that the gods, there is some lore there, but it's really not designed necessarily to fit in any old game world. So whatever I came up with for this Crystalli had to tie into my game. That lore needed to be actionable. So I was gonna have to create a new mythology and then use it, which is not a problem because I knew I could get it to give me plot hooks. Because if the entities, the deities, these primordials are going to have a central role in my revised game, my remastered game, then whatever desires they had would be great plot hooks, would be great engines of force in my game and moving the characters. And then I also wanted to make sure that whatever lore that I did come up with, the players could engage with it. It's not good enough just to have, some pages of notes in your binder or on your computer somewhere. If your players never see it, they never talk to it, they never engage with it. So whatever I came up with had to be usable as a backstory, perhaps, for the characters, and whether or not they were a worshiper of this god. How does his tale weave into the greater game world, and is there stuff there that players can incorporate into their backstories? And last but not least, of course, you want to make sure that your lore that you're coming up with, this mythology, has a connection with Pathfinder Second Edition mechanics. Which again, I'm going to put some props out there for 2E. A lot of the skills in the game are awesome at doing this, and a lot of it is actually in the exploration and downtime activities that are central modes of play in Pathfinder, where they're almost afterthoughts in D&D. So there was a lot of stuff I could work with, mechanically speaking, rules in Pathfinder 2E to connect to whatever lore that I ultimately came up with for this primordial that I was gonna recreate from this Crystalli. So how do you go about forging this myth, this new lore? Well, what I do is I take the resources I have, which internet, some book. I take my notes, I take my own ideas, and I use that to work with Kathy, the AI muse, chat GPT, and I work with her to help flesh that out, to give depth and spontaneity and layers to the lore. I also make use of what I call a primordial template, which I'll show you in a minute. That's a series of guided questions I've come up with that has ordered sections that takes the mythology of whatever it is and breaks it into defined bits of lore that I can flow story off of. And then of course I'm referencing the gods and magic. I'm referencing the core rule book in order to align what I'm coming up with some samples, examples, mechanics from the game itself. And the entry you're seeing here is from the Gods and Magic page 10. And so in the Gods and Magic book, they have a stat block, I guess you might call this, the entries that you'll see in any of the deities in the Pathfinder game. There's mention of allies and enemies and relationships and temples and worshippers. Now, a lot of the stuff I had already thought of, but a lot of these things I hadn't. So what kind of screwed me up a little bit, I was hoping to get this video out a little bit sooner, but when I took my original template and I started looking at the Pathfinder stuff, I started looking at the remastered stuff that's now trickling out through YouTube. I had to remesh things together. I had to expand my horizons, I guess, in order to come up with this remade Primordial. And that is where this template had to get a little bit of revising. So you can kind of see here the sub bullet is one of those things from the Pathfinder allies enemies here that I took and I put into my mythology section for my primordial. Now my primordial template is twice this length, probably actually a little bit longer because I have another section which I'm not talking about today. But anyway, I've taken this primordial template, as I'm calling it, and I've divided it into mythology, which is what you're seeing here, and I have another section for religion, which leads into cults for the second part of it. But what I have here is the list of topics, sections that relate to the story of whatever entity I'm creating. So I'm creating a new primordial from the original Crystalline, and I need to have that information fit these categories, these topics, answer these guiding questions, and then as I work on it, it gets bigger and more involved as I go. And I throw in any thoughts or information I have from my game world to help flesh this out. So the original entry was lean, as I've mentioned, and so I really couldn't answer a bunch of these questions with it, but I certainly had a lot of my own ideas and my own notes that I was able to incorporate and bring it in there. So what I want to do is do a quick showcase of how this works using ChatGPT so that you can see in real time how you can use a template such as this one, which is modified with the Pathfinder entries, like for instance the allies and enemies, as I just said. This was added in here from the Gods and Magic book, and how you can start to answer these questions and flesh out some of this information. So let me go ahead and fire up Chatty Cathy, and I'll show you how this works. All right, so here's ChatGPT, and what I would do is I would tell her, Kathy, what I want as far as this primordial goes, because right now she's a blank slate. She has no idea what it is I'm trying to do. So I need to tell her, like, hey, what's a primordial? I need to tell her who this Crystalli guy is, and then I need to tell her, well, what I want you to do with those two bits of information, which is my template. So I'm gonna tell her about what primordials are. Then I'm going to tell her what I know about Crystalline, and then I'm going to give her my template and say, yo, answer these questions as best you can, or hypothesize or whatever, extrapolate from the resources, and give me something to work with, right? And then from there, I'll be able to go back and forth with it. So let me go ahead and get the primordial introduction there first. Okay, here is the info about primordials. So I paste this, just telling her what primordials are. And then I tell her that each primordial is going to be listed into a couple of sections. So I'm saying, hey, I've got primordials in my game world. And that each of them is divided into two main sections. So, okay, just had to clarify a couple things real quick. So I'm just telling her that I'm remastering my game, right? And then I'm telling a little bit, hey, the vaults are filled with these primordials. Primordials are the gods. Some of them are still around today, and I need to turn them into playable, usable stuff. And I need to break each of them into two sections, mythology and religion. And hey, would you like to help? So she'll probably, oh, sure, she'd love to help. Give me some info. So let's see what she says. Absolutely, we'd love to help you, yada yada. Please provide me with the guiding questions and any specific details. All right, so there we go. So now I'm going to say, here are the guiding questions I use to design my primordials. Look them over and let me know if you have any questions. Look at that. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and paste my template. Okay, here's my template. All right, so I've got just the mythology section. Here are the and I'm going to specify, here are the guiding questions for the mythology section only. I want to start there. I use these to design my primordials. Look them over and let me know if you have any questions. So here they are, right? History is the first section. So origin of the primordial. Status, what's its current situation? Part of that is the allies and enemies. So that would be the Pathfinder specific stuff. Then description, physical, what does it manifest? What does it look like? Renown, what's it known for? Realm, where is it ruling? Where is it living? Where is it imprisoned? Goals, what does it want? Okay, so let's go ahead and enter this and see what she says. Great, these guiding questions will help create the detailed stuff. Here's a rough draft of primordial based on the questions. So look at it. Okay, here's something I've cautioned in some of my older videos. She's immediately firing out ideas of a primordial. I'm like, dude, I got my own primordials. Why are you giving me stuff? So I'm going to stop her. Thank you for your eagerness, but I already have an idea for a primordial. Would you like to see my notes? You can use those in combination with my primordial template to help design the remastered version. All right, so I had to tell her to chill. Right, so I forgot one of my cardinal rules. You always gotta tell her, whoa, wait till I tell you everything, because otherwise, bam, she's going like she's already firing out this huge, and maybe this is good stuff, Araxiel, whatever that is, but I don't need you freelancing, right? I got my own idea. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab the Crystalli information I have. I'm gonna put that in here for her to use. All right, so here is the information. And what I've already kind of revised this to chop out some of the D&D sort of references, so that, because one of the other things is that Kathy can get a little bit off sidetracked if you have, let's say, names of, proprietary whatever, locations or people. It'll start looking down that instead of what you want, which is, I need this primordial. I don't need stuff about Greyhawk, right? Boom. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that. So this is excerpted from the internet page there, as well as the Dragon Magazine's information. So I'm slapping this in here. Now she's saying, using your detailed notes on Crystalli, let's shape the mythology. So now she's going, right? She's taking and she's creating a history section, a status, allies and enemies, description, renown, realm, goals, and she's going, right? Now, as I've said this before as well, that I mean, this is just the first pass. You're not going to use this as is. This is just some information. Now, what I do is I take my own, thinking, my own notes, my own whatever I got, and I will start plugging it in here, especially as I read through this and um, realize that, yeah, that doesn't work in my game, that sort of thing. So you can see that Kathy's already been incorporating some of my game stuff here. Scion War, that's my campaign. Plane of Mineral, that is from the D&D resource. So that doesn't exist in my game world, right? So this is where, spoiler, Prismar, where you have to start to get your thoughts going and revise and reshape as you go so that it fits your game better. So this is the start of the process, right? So now what we want to do is take a quick look at the results. What happens after hours, days, weeks perhaps of going back and forth using your knowledge of your game world with Kathy's ability to quickly integrate, adapt, revise, and layer complexity. She's very good at coming up with novel things that you may not have thought of. Maybe you would have thought of, but it might have taken you 6 weeks, or, oh yeah, you would have thought about that later. But she's able to fire out really quickly a lot of cool ideas. And some of the stuff that she comes with, it honestly amazes me. And it gives me some cool thoughts, and then I start to do a back and forth with her. I'll do a lot of, well, what if type of questions here. Well, what if that suggestion you made was actually this other thing? So let's take a look at an example of history that would have come out. What is the result? What happens with this thing? So let's check in with our vaults resident and see what we know about Kristali, who, through my process, acquired the new name Kavarka.
But every entity evolves, and from the luminescence of crystally emerged the being's true name, Kavarka, his luminant brilliance, the radiant sovereign of Prismar, the unblemished lord of Quartzerum, the flawless ward of the Luminar Nexus and king of all Jolkin, my beacon.
Now, his name change just scratched the surface of what Kathy and I came up with. We ended up generating 20 plus pages of crazy lore, which is a tale that I'll be telling in future videos. But in conclusion, for this one, there's lots of stuff out there for you to get resources on homebrewing gods. You can, of course, use classical stuff like Greek mythology. You can make up your own stuff. You can use Pathfinder, D&D, third-party stuff, Cobalt Press, whatever, right? Weird games, products, etc. Pathfinder 2nd edition, the mechanics in the core rulebook, Gods and Magic Game Mastery Guide, etc., which are going to be found in the player core and the GM core. There's tons of stuff in there that you can rely upon as well. Not just the God stuff, but the mechanics for the game and for the different skills and activities you can do. ChatGPT. I mean, say what you want about the AI taking over the world, but she sure is smart. She helps a ton to generate ideas and refine our creativity, my creativity. I mean, you saw what she did when I didn't tell her I wanted Kavarka Kristali. She just started firing out whatever, right? I guess that's creative, but it's not useful because it wasn't what I wanted. So ChatGPT is a tool. You need to train her on what you need help with. And just in just that one click, there was enough there that we created a brand new primordial, right? I went back and forth with her to find a new name, But just in that short little blip there, you saw quickly that she gave me information about, goals and personality and history and, fame, renown, appearance, etc. Right? So it was a quick, easy process. Again, I had to go back and forth with her several times to refine it for what I wanted. But if you are just sort of freewheeling and just trying to figure something out quick, she can give you something really, really simply. And if you have something to start with, an inspiration, something you found somewhere, if you have like that template like I do where you're actually directing her on what to do, you can crank out, a primordial within a few hours that's believable. Uh, and I ended up with this Kavarka, this luminescent primordial, living in the vaults. I've got an NPC speaking for him. And when you look at his lore, which is the future videos, you'll see he's full of vanity over his appearance, this gem, beauty. And his realm, this plane of mineral, as it was originally called, now known as Prismar, the city of Quart Zarum. He is in charge. He's in control of vast resources, gemstone wealth. It gave me a whole new realm that fit my imagination for this gleaming, brilliant giant of crystalline entity. And then just the various strategies of how to go through this process using ChatGPT, using the template of your own design, using Pathfinder mechanics to guide your decisions. You're going to end up seeing that helps you generate lots of scenarios and ideas for activities for your characters to do during exploration, downtime activities, plot hooks, quest ideas, you name it. There's tons of stuff. So, hey, where are we going next? I've kind of alluded to it, but I'm going to close this out by going one last time to our resident expert on Kavarka, who's going to tell us all about the shimmering pursuit of perfection. We're going to be diving into Kavarka's history along with the tie-ins I've been talking about to gameplay and Pathfinder mechanics. Take it away, Vault's narrator.
You ask of Kavarka's ancient days. Very well. I shall unveil what shadows have veiled. My lord, a gem among us, sprang from earth and starlight's embrace. His reign in the depths, a saga of splendor, birthed Quart Zarum, where crystals danced to his will. But war, the Cyan War, it beckoned, and Kavarka, in his magnificence, defied the very gods. His ambition, boundless. His might, a beacon for all crystal kind. Alas, divinity clashed with primordial dreams. The gods, threatened by his luster, shattered his form with celestial fury. Yet, we remember, in each fractured shard, his essence endures, as does our devotion. A legacy unbroken. Such is the tale, Delver. Ponder it well, for within lies the truth of our luminescent master.
I want to thank you for tuning in. Hopefully there was some information useful for you. Hopefully this was entertaining. Had some fun. Saw how you can rely upon some resources besides just what's in the book. And if you want to see more content, you want to see more of the story of Kavarka, his lore, his religion, his followers, his cult, hit the like button, subscribe, leave some comments down below. I will catch you on the next video. Peace out.